what I have here is a 210-year-old paper, the National Intelligencer, dated February 18th, 1815, with many news on the congressional leadership debating the Treaty of Ghent, which I will get to, and the victory at New Orleans, which under General Andrew Jackson, and then future president, was one of, if not the most impressive victories of all of the war, which the War of 1812 is known as the Forgotten War. It is way less known in the annals of history and amongst the common folk. It is way less than even the Vietnam or Korean War, which are also somewhat known as forgotten wars, but we will get to those at later dates. On the inside page, you will see the full text, the complete text, basically rushed out. This is basically an extra morning edition, if you will, even though it doesn't mention that, because that is not how newspapers back then were done. But as you can tell, it has dated today, Saturday, February 18th, whereas a treaty of peace and amity between the United States of America and His Britannic Majesty was signed at Ghent on the 24th day of December, 1814. And down here you could see, which is what this news makes this newspaper just amazing, in my opinion, is that it was actually the same day, which makes it kind of a rarity amongst these old papers. As you can see, done at the city of Washington this 18th day of February in the year of our Lord. And another thing to note that makes this, that you could tell it was a morning paper. It says here, celebrate a general illumination. On this evening, it is recommended by the mayor, with the advice of the city council, in celebration of peace. His proclamation on the subject will appear this morning. So that is a very clear indication that this paper was a morning edition, which, it being a morning edition in the same day as the Treaty of Ghent was signed by President Madison, and the whole entire treaty taking up this page, it just goes to show how remarkably fast, especially for the National Intelligencer, which was basically the government's mouthpiece. It's basically what the Washington Post is today, or the New York Times is to the city of New York, vice versa. Now, the start of the war, which I also have that exact paper. I will get to that at a later date. This is more so of the anniversarial papers, if you will. Basically, the War of 1812 started, or was declared for three reasons. First, the British were impressing our sailors because at the time, obviously, they were deeply into a war with France and the Emperor Napoleon, who later in September of that year would do a catastrophic march, capture Moscow, but at the expense of hightailing it out of there because of a scorched earth policy by the Russians and Tsar Alexander. And they would basically lose 90% of their army on the march back, something that was repeated by another dictator. Not that Napoleon was a dictator, I'm more saying in terms of historical ramifications. Two, because of the war, ongoing war with Napoleon, they set a embargo on the U.S. And the U.S. wanted to have its own say in the world policies after the War of Independence. So basically, the Treaty of Ghent put everything on the back burner and basically nullified the disagreements that we had with the British and basically set all the boundaries post-war, meaning all the boundaries that we had and decided mainly via the Louisiana Purchase, the Treaty of 1783, and so on. It basically, all that kind of went back to the way it was. And lastly, for I guess a fourth reason, the British, they wanted to help the Native Americans expand westward and I guess reclaim some of their territory. So some of the more famous events that I will get to in a later video were the capture of York in Canada, the burning of the capital, the Battle of Lake Erie, the battle between the USS Constitution and HMS Guerriere, which was the very first engagement of the war, and the Constitution, now known as Old Ironsides, that's how it got its name. It hauled the Guerriere back to port with it, to Boston. It came into Boston September 1st, 1812, which I also have that paper. Basically, every single newspaper that I own is like this, same day or day after, printed within the city or country that it happened in, and just like this, everything is here, printed the exact same day. I have broadsheets, I have special editions. I'll get to all this later, but I just kind of wanted to lay that out. But that is the gist of the War of 1812 in a nutshell, because I don't want to go into great detail as of yet. And the National Intelligencer from February 18th, 1815.